Hello, dear whiskey lover. Thank you for joining me again. I'm Rosemary, and today I want to try and share with you and tell you a little bit about one of the most complex whiskies that I've tried to chat with you about for a very long time. I must tell you, I've just had a lovely 3 or 4 minutes chatting to you about it, and I realised I hadn't pushed the start button, but I've done that now, so I still haven't had a sip, and I do promise you that. So, what is it? Well, it's from a distillery that's not terribly well known. It's the first whiskey I've owned from it, and I was given it as a gift by my friend Gilly Bassan of Spirit and Spice fame. And if you are in Scotland or coming to Scotland and you want to have a whiskey adventure, check her out because she does the best whiskey experience in Moray. So she brought this to me, a Benriach Smoke series, or Smoke season, I should say. And it's a Speyside whiskey. Benriach is just south of Elgin. And it's full on smoke. But if you've watched my whiskey videos before, you'll know that my relationship with smoke tends to come and go, or peat tends to come and go. And sometimes I'm just absolutely up for it, Port Charlotte, love it. And then other times, if it's a bit in your face and no subtlety, I just can't cope with it. And sometimes I say, I really only want peating now as a seasoning to my whiskey. Well, it is absolutely the dominating aroma sense that you get from the whiskey. But there's a lot more to it as well. It is sweet. It's got some toffee notes. It's got kind of caramel pastry, if you're making a little tartlet and the juices from some fruit have run into the pastry and baked, and it's just touch of the Parisian cake shops about it. There's a touch of top fruit in it as well, apples and pears, but toffee and tablet, I think I'd say tablet, which is Scottish fudge, not quite so sweet as traditional fudge. Right? How can you say fudge or tablet's not sweet? I mean, that's ridiculous. But there is so much here. And honestly, you could just sit back and drool over this for a long, long time before you actually settled in to drink it. And when Gilly gave it to me, she said, it is so creamy at the moment. And my go-to reference, I live in Orkney, an archipelago of islands off the north coast of Scotland. And one of our 2 distilleries, Scapa, their kind of standard whiskey, the Scapa Skyron, I would call that creamy heather honey notes. And this couldn't be more different from that. So I guess you don't want to sit and listen to me talking about how the aromas are developing for an hour. So just for you, dear viewer, I'm going to take a sip. That is so full on peatiness, and yet on the tongue there is this glorious slide of sweetness. And I get completely what Gilly is saying about creaminess as well, because it is like a creamy tablet fudge caramel type experience. But then all around the top of your mouth on the first sip, and I do promise you that, not for all time, but for today, that is my first sip. All around the top of my mouth, there is this really drying, toasted peatiness. Smoke season, oh yes, definitely. we're just coming into spring as I'm reviewing this at the beginning of March in Scotland, although I think we're due some snow in the next few days. But if ever there was an autumn or winter type whiskey flavour, that would be it. It's massive. It's 52.8% ABV, alcohol by volume. So of course there's a huge depth of flavour. But that first sip was definitely dividing up my mouth. So let's have a second sip. Now that's much, much tamer. And actually what's fascinating about this now is that on the finish, on the second sip, it's like the smoke is coming through on the smoke from the peatedness is coming through, and it just grows. It kind of comes at you and then is just all enveloping. But that gorgeous sweetness is there as well. Wow, that is quite some whiskey. And it's a whiskey that I can't honestly tell you this is the first time I've done this, because some people find it too much. Now, it's 52.8. I've purposely not put any water in it yet, because we'll go back to do that. But it's a whiskey that changes according to the glass. So I've moved from the Glencairn. I was going to say, you can't say these are the traditional nosing glasses because they've only been around for, I don't know, a decade and a bit. But this glass is the Norlan glass, and it was, Norlan is an American company, but this was developed in conjunction with Jim McEwan, who was legendary on Islay for many, many years as a master blender. And he has worked on this glass with them, and it's got kind of like little buttresses inside it, and they say if you have a good old swirl, that it helps to kind of bring out everything from the whiskey. So that whereas on the Glencairn the first hit is overwhelmingly the peatedness of it, here it's much more rounded, and the Glencairn, the Norlan glass, absolutely brings out the other sweetness. Now, this whiskey, although it's non-age statement, it's double matured, so it's done in ex-bourbon barrels, but also highly toasted virgin oak. So there's a lot to extract from the wood as well, and that is obviously where the sweetness comes from. So the nose on this is totally different. It's not that, whoa, boom, I'm a peated whiskey. It's, I'm a complex whiskey, and there's lots to find out about me. So from this glass, the whole experience is much more stitched together. The peated smoke is all around my mouth. Do you remember from the Glencairn? I had the sweetness on my tongue first and then all the peatedness around the top. With this, it's pulling out that sweetness and everything is melded together. Now, obviously, my mouth has become more accustomed to this whiskey since my first sip from the Glencairn, but I'm very struck by the difference, and this makes it much more accessible. I personally don't enjoy drinking out of this glass. It's a double skin glass, and it's a bit kind of thick at the top. Now that's, if that whiskey isn't now actually a teddy bear, it's a brown bear or a grizzly bear that's kind of well, of course, what am I saying? They're not drainable. Maybe they are, who knows? But if it's not actually a soft and squidgy teddy bear, yeah, it's going in that direction. It's so much more accessible. And, you know, maybe that's not what Rachel Barry wants from this whiskey. But if you're not actually a peathead, smokehead, whatever, it does make the whiskey more accessible. And I find that fascinating. Do you, dear viewer? And then my final shot at having a dram of this is in this glass, which looks a bit like a fishbowl. And this is actually a glass that was free with a 10-year-old Benriach. And Benriach isn't all that far away from Benriach rather, I should say. But theirs is quite a heavily peated whiskey as well. Not of the same gravitas by any stretch of the imagination as this, but their 10-year-old tastes fantastic out of this glass. So, the peatedness is there on the nose with this, but much tamer than with the Glencairn. Definitely not as stitched together as in the Norland glass. And it has lost that I am a special whiskey that the whiskey had in this Glencairn, but it is much more accessible. But if you're bothering to watch this, you, like me, are a whiskey fan. So let's just go back to my little tot left in the Glencairn. And for us, this is the one to drink it from. But as I say, 52.8% ABV. Just putting a spot of water in it. Gilly was happily drinking this neat. When I first tasted it, I found it quite challenging, neat. I guess it's cold outside. This is warming me up inside. I'm more in the mood for it today, but just adding that little bit of water to it does get it more on the way to the whiskey that I was tasting here in the Norland glass and here in the Benriach glass. But if I explain to you that Benriach is part of a triumvirate of whiskey distilleries that is now owned by Brown-Forman, US multi-drinks company, really spreading the word of making spirit drinking accessible. But before it was bought out by them, it was part of the triumvirate that Billy Walker really put on the map. Excuse me, this legendary whiskey guy. And its co-distilleries are Glengasnow, which I'm going to make a mission to find out about because I've not tasted any of their whiskies. But Glendronach, yeah, Glendronach, that's what I said. Glendronach as in the revival. So the three, Glendronach, Glenglasnow and Benriach. And Benriach has got floor maltings, as has Highland Park here in Orkney, and that makes it a very, very special distillery. Some people say Benriach is the jewel in that triumvirate. Some say that it's Glendronach. I need to find out about the other one to see where that sits. When Billy Walker sold to Brown-Forman, they brought in Rachel Barry as the master blender, Dr. Rachel Barry, previously of Morrison Bowmore. And so if you're an Islay whiskey fan, you'll know Bowmore, you'll know Rachel's work. Yes, people say the Glendronach 15-year-old, the revival, is different. Yeah, it is slightly different, but it's still a flagship whiskey. And I always notice that my little review of that has got, you know, a few more hits than the others. So yeah, I was a bit overwhelmed by this whiskey when Gilly first gave it to me. But you know what? Where are we? It's going well down in the bottle. I shall be sorry to see it go. And when I first tasted it, I wasn't sure I would be saying that. I'm just adding the Benriach glass to this one. But I would like to taste other whiskies from the distillery. And luckily, one of my big whiskey boyfriends, Eddie, has just moved in literally 2 or 3 miles down the road. So as soon as we're down there visiting, this is one of the distilleries that will be right up there on our list to visit. Because it's different, it's grown up, it's a real whiskey lover's whiskey. And thank you, Gilly Bassan, for bringing it up to Orkney for me to try, which was really generous of you. And don't forget to check out Gilly's Spirit and Spice website. And, you know, for a real treat, book yourself on one of her whiskey and food tastings, or whiskey safaris, as she calls them. But this is different. And who didn't turn her, who was so unprofessional that she didn't mute her sound haptics on her watch? I apologise, dear viewer, for that. But you can see actually in the whiskey world that it's starting to suffer a certain amount of homogenisation. So to come across a whiskey like this is a rare and wonderful treat. And I'm just so lucky to have had a bottle of this and to have been able to tell you a little bit about it. So check it out. I don't know if it will be available where you're watching this, but if not, I imagine following the success of this, it's one that will be repeated. So cheers for now, and see you next time. Bye. I wonder if I repeated myself an awful lot in that. Who knows? But, oh dear, I hope they realise that I really, really, really do like this.